Let's start with the before lecture chant. An unsurpassed, penetrating, and perfect Dharma is rarely met with, even in 100,000 million kalpas, having it to see and listen to remember and accept. I vow to taste the truth of the Tathagata's words. Good morning, everybody. My talk today is based on, it's a little larger here, there we go, based on the 3 Dharma seals, as in S-E-A-L-S, in Thich Nhat Hanh's book, The Heart of the Buddha's Teachings. And you might have heard of these actually related to as the 3 marks of existence, and they're sometimes also referred to as the 4 Dharma seals. But Thich Nhat Hanh expresses these 3 as impermanence, non-self, and nirvana. And here again, you may have heard of them in a different way. You might have heard of them as impermanence, boundlessness, and nirvana, as they refer to them at Upaya Zen Center, or impermanence, non-self, and suffering. And the 4 seals would be all 4 of those options. So impermanence, non-self, suffering, and nirvana, ceasing of suffering. And all of these are expressing the same important aspects of the Buddha's teachings. Seal here has much the same significance as it does in our lives. For example, there's a seal of authority on an important document. So a seal is in fact an authentication, a truth. So we can say that these are the fundamental truths of Buddhism: impermanence, non-self, and nirvana. So the first Dharma seal, impermanence, of course, is not just some sort of idea or notion, but rather it's a lifelong practice to support us to experience things as they really are, to touch reality. So the practice of impermanence is actualized in our daily lives, and Thich Nhat Hanh really emphasizes this. In our daily lives, moment after moment, and he encourages us to nourish it every day, all day long. I know that we are familiar with the Buddhist teachings on impermanence, and I know that this word often might have a negative connotation. Certainly impermanence can appear to cause everyday suffering or dissatisfaction from being too cold or too hot, from ending a relationship to not ending a relationship, to the death of someone that we will dearly miss. However, Thich Nhat Hanh reminds us that it's not actually impermanence itself that creates our suffering. In his words, it's wanting things to be permanent when they are not. Change, as we know, sometimes is unwanted, it's difficult, it's challenging, just plainly what we do not want. And we also know that impermanence does not necessarily lead to suffering, and often doesn't. We're seated here today in fully matured bodies as a result of our infant bodies changing drastically, and the explosive change that takes place in the earth as a seed breaks out of its covering to become a seedling that stealthily pushes its way to the surface, a seedling which eventually we enjoy as a beautiful flower, or maybe even as a weed. Without impermanence, life simply would not be. So our practice, John, I'm going to mute you here if I can. There we go. So our practice has been to accept things as they really are, to learn to appreciate the value of impermanence. Cultivating this kind of appreciation teaches us to respect and value every moment and all that is precious around us. and in us. Thich Nhat Hanh says that impermanence is what makes transformation possible. And he suggests that we should all learn to say, long live impermanence, because it is through the teachings on impermanence and our practice of it that we learn to acknowledge and appreciate what is without attachment. So a little story, a really good friend of mine, Sharon, has a half dozen or so orange trees on her property. And some weeks ago, as she normally does, she picked some oranges, put them in a box, and gave them to me the last time I visited her. And we're both really happy about this. I wouldn't say it's a ritual, but it's something that I kind of come to expect, and it's something I know she will do. She's sharing something she really loves, and she knows I love them. So this week I sat down with an orange. I was kind of in the middle of putting this top together, and I had it in my hand. And, it's an amazing product of nature. And this one I began, just peeling it with my fingers. And you know how that is. With each pull you've got of the peel, you have all this beautiful aromatic of the orange. And I pulled apart the wedges and I started to eat them one by one. Really flavorful, sweet, really juicy. So juicy I had to lean over the plate so the juices would run off my chin onto my shirt. And I know you know this wonderful moment. But it seems like all of our senses come together to enjoy this fruit, this notion of an orange. And it's interesting how much accumulated wisdom we have just from living our lives, this common wisdom, so that as I'm talking about this, I know you can smell it, and you can feel it, and you can taste it. And as I was enjoying eating this, I also had the flash of the image of Sharon's hand holding it and snipping it from its stem off the tree. And I thought, yeah, what went into this being in my hand today? So there's Sharon caring enough to walk out to her property one day to pick these with me in mind. There is her care for over 30 years of these particular trees, nurturing them, making sure they have enough water, not too much water, protecting them from freezing temperatures that tend to come on so unexpectedly sometimes in the winter out in the country. And I thought of her mother, who herself felt how important it was to plant an orange tree and a grapefruit tree in their backyard many decades ago. Two huge, beautiful green trees, always laden with abundant sweet fruit every single year. And she taught Sharon to care and appreciate these trees and the fruits they bore year after year, making sure to cut the stem close to the fruit so that next year's harvest would be as abundant as possible. And sometimes I helped her pick the grapefruit and oranges, climbing up into the tree, really large trees. And after a while, I'd get tired and I think, do I have to get the ones at the top? Do I have to go all the way up there? Can't they just fall off as they might naturally do? And she said, no, of course. She knew a lot more about fruit trees than I did, and a lot more about caring for them. So getting back to the orange in my hand, it is also obviously dependent not only on Sharon, but on the person who nurtured the seed to begin with, from whom she bought it, on the clouds that offer rain, the insects, worms, and other animals that aerate the soil. And all of these conditions were right for there to be this orange. And when conditions are right, things manifest. Always. Even back through time. And now it's in my body. It's nourishing me. It has become a part of my very structure. And then what manifests from there? Well, I ate this orange. I thought of Sharon. I picked up the phone and I called her to tell her how wonderful the orange was and to thank her again for making the effort to give them to me. And she was really happy. And so was I. She told me later, that just really perked me up that day. I was having kind of a bad day. Impermanence, always changing, always manifesting into something new, based on the conditions around it. And we all know this. Things can and will change. This is the truth. It's a seal. And we also know that we can help things change with our own intentions, our own creativity, our visions, our own potential, and the full potential of all things. And so it is, this continuous manifesting, beginningless and endless. No birth, no death. Yep, the orange was not born the day its blossom appeared and we saw it, and it ripened into the fruit we eat. Nor did it die when I had finished eating it and had disposed of the peels. And I decided to put this anecdote in between Dharma Seal 1 and 2 as kind of a bridge between impermanence and non-self. Because this story is a manifestation really of them both. The second seal, non-self, boundlessness, emptiness, is the fundamental truth that all things inter-are with all other things. There is no separate existence or separate self. And Thich Nhat Hanh reminds us that this is not a philosophy or some kind of doctrine, but rather it's an insight. And by nurturing our insight into non-self, we live more deeply, more fully. We suffer less, and we have the ability to enjoy life more. And maybe this is something you've noticed about your own lives over the years that you've been practicing. In fact, importantly, I think we have the great opportunity right here, in this safe place of this Zendo, both physical and online, with our Sangha, to actualize our non-discriminating wisdom, to live the truth that everything and everyone belongs to the same stream of life. Those are Thich Nhat Hanh's words. And each of us is not separate from any of us, here and across time and space. And when we're talking about these fundamental teachings of the Buddha, whether I'm reading or writing or thinking, I love that I can hear and see and feel the words we chant together every Sunday. These words that are so embedded in our tradition, in our rituals and our chants, whether the Heart Sutra, the Metta Sutta, or the other chants we have. We say the words that Avalokiteshvara uttered, that are part of the Heart Sutra. No eyes, no ears, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind. And this insight that they are all empty, boundless. They cannot be independent. They have no separate existence, and they inter-are with other elements and conditions that make them up. Make up I, that make up body, that make up mind. So an I is made of non-I elements. So too are we made up of non-we elements. And here also is impermanence in full display. We change moment by moment. The orange enters our body and it becomes us. Next moment we breathe out without even thinking about it, of course. And we breathe out all which we push back out into the world. Constant changing of this manifestation of what we call us. Of course, there is no us that is separate from all that is. And Thich Nhat Hanh asks us to practice until we can see that each person is us, and we are each person, all in one, one in all. The notion of birth and death, although so ingrained in us as the beginning and the end of something, is just that, it's a notion. And then there is this idea that from a non-being, we become a being. or that dying means that we suddenly move from something to nothing. But the Buddha said, there is no birth and no death, no being and no non-being. And how did he help us to realize this? He offered his teachings on impermanence, non-self, interbeing, and emptiness in order to help us discover the true nature of reality. Now, I think you've probably all heard this koan that's really well known, which is, what was your face before your parents were born? What was your face before your parents were born? And we've been offered this question to encourage us to look within ourselves deeply and to identify ourselves in time and space, because we're already here in many forms. Thich Nhat Hanh says that the day of our birth was only a day of continuation. So better to sing Happy Continuation Day every year rather than Happy Birthday. So we should try to remember that. And this is actually nirvana, a word that means extinction. It's the ground of being, the substance of all that is, Thich Nhat Hanh says. So nirvana is actually the complete silencing of concepts, meaning no permanence, no impermanence, no birth, no death, no self or non-self, no me, other. These ideas all tend to cause us to suffer. And it's true, of course, that we have to negotiate all of these, what he calls relative realities in our daily lives. And so the Buddha gave us impermanence and non-self as tools, as a raft for crossing over to the shore of well-being. And nirvana, our awakened mind, does not exist separately from these tools of impermanence and non-self. Knowing how to use these tools to touch reality, how things really are, we also touch nirvana in this very moment. To end this part of the discussion in his chapter, Thich Nhat Hanh writes, quote, nirvana is a fan that helps us extinguish the fire of all our ideas, including ideas of impermanence and self. That fan is our practice of looking deeply every day. And in our practice, end quote, and in our practice in our daily lives, we can use the wisdom and energy of the three seals to help us see more deeply into and clarify a difficulty or a decision we're making or facing. For example, when we feel some anxiety or notice an aversion or a clinging, we might ask ourselves if we're resisting some aspect of our world or our life that has changed in permanence. We might ask if by treating ourselves or others as selves, separate from the rest of the world, have we now constrained our very understanding of the world? And have we become unable to change? Non-self. Thirdly, we might ask, what is the nature of the suffering I am now experiencing? The Buddha and Thich Nhat Hanh have given us such reliable tools to make our way across to the other shore. So I say, let's just keep rowing together